As usual, we are so excited to see each other again after 2 or 3 days that we've seen each other, that we can't wait to catch up. I want to welcome each of you to this, our 3rd annual Virginia Lassiter Leadership Luncheon. The purpose of this event is twofold. One, to honor the legacy of our beloved Virginia Lassiter and her lifetime of service to this library and to her goal of making certain that we have publicly funded excellent library service. And the second part of this event is to honor leaders in our community that exemplify what Jutta exemplified for all of us. And this year, as we focus on the early aspect of arts and culture in Lake Wales, and we have 3 wonderful panelists here, and Myrtice will introduce them as we go along. So, as many of you know, the Lake Wales Library Association, which we now call also the Friends of the Library, was formed in 1957 with the express purpose of building a library. By 1960, the library was built with 100% local funds. In 1991, when our library was bursting at the seams, again, we raised the money locally to expand the library to its present size, all with local funds. In 2013, when our library was woefully in need of a remodel, our Library Association raised $89,000 right here in Lake Wales to refurbish our library, bring it up to date, and we have the beautiful library that we have now. So, as you can see, our Library Association has a long and wonderful legacy of help, and our goal, of course, is still to support and enhance the work of the library. So I'd like to introduce some of our board members that are present today. If you all will stand up. There's Jody Schmidt. There's Tina. That's our library board meeting, is Deborah Solo as on our city board. And then we have our Library Association board, members Chip and Judy, and some other folks couldn't be here. We have, we want to thank Tobias Reister from the Tampa Bay Library Consortium is here videoing this for us. We want to thank Michael Burkow from Ridge Catering, who's doing our fabulous looking lunch. And we also, of course, want to introduce our beloved Tina Peak, who is not just only our director, but now in charge of historical resources here in Lake Wales. So we also want to thank the sponsors of this luncheon, which is the family of Robert and Virginia Lassiter, which all of you know the Lassiters. Wave your hands. Right. Okay. Right. And the law firm of Peterson Myers and Carlton's Flowers. We also want to welcome Emiliana back, who was one of our panelists from last year when we did the agribusiness panel that was just a lot of fun. And so just some housekeeping. Please silence your phones. The restrooms are on my right and your left, and the exit is at the back of the room. And that's it. Right now, Chip Tallberry, the Vice President of the Library Association, is going to give the invocation. All right, now then for what you've been waiting for, we have our panelists coming up, but Myrtice Young is going to introduce them to you. And many of you know Myrtice, who is a lifelong resident of Polk County and a graduate of Lake Wales High School. Myrtice is the Lake Wales High School. Myrtice is the Historic Preservation Manager for Polk County, serving as liaison between the Polk County Board of County Commission and the Polk County Historical Commission. She's also responsible for managing the wonderful Polk County History Center in the old courthouse in Bartow. She's a graduate of Polk State College and the University of South Florida. This is the 3rd year that Myrtice has interviewed our guests for this event. Please welcome Myrtice Young.
Let me get out of your ways. Thank you so much. And, I just want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to come over and spend this time with you. I love being with you, and I love coming over here. I talk about a center of culture. I planned my day. It's a trifecta. I came first to the museum and took in the new Seminole tourism exhibit, which is just awesome. The museum is beautiful. Y'all, I know, are so proud of that. I'm here to be with you for this special occasion, and then I'm going to head down to Babson Park for the Babson Park Crooked Lake Heritage Festival. Then I learned when I got here, you think, could Lake Wales be doing more? Well, I missed the bus tour, the Heritage Trail bus tour that happened earlier. So, like I said, I just love being here with you. I wanted to share with you a little bit. Just this past year in September, the History Center celebrated our 20th anniversary. And at that anniversary, we dedicated a new museum, gallery, exhibit. And the exhibit is about the history of arts and culture in Polk County. So what a great fit today. And I wanted to share with you just a couple of thoughts. When we started doing the research for this exhibit, we learned some things about the wonderful people. We always talk about the grit and grace of the people who settled this area and made Polk County what it is. And one of the things that we discovered when we started doing the research for the exhibit is that people from the very beginning, our early settlers in the area, loved the humanities, they loved culture, and they loved art. And I wanted to share with you just a few tidbits that are featured in the exhibit. First of all, you'll be so proud that part of the exhibit features architecture. 1914, there is a little mention, a significant mention of Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., who provided the landscapes for Bach Tower. As early as 1893, we have mention of literature in Polk County as Lakeland's Literary and Social Society organized and started holding weekly meetings. Arts education really started in the county pretty early. In 1923, G.E. Everett became the superintendent of Lakeland schools, and during his tenure oversaw the implementation of many art programs, including music, Tina, you'll love this, library training, drama, and also a glee club. Music, as early as 1860, entertained our early pioneers, as we saw this quote from the Honorable Ben Blunt. People would visit each other on Sunday and sing a good many songs from the old sacred harp, containing the 4 shape notes, fa, sol, la, mi. And I tell you, I didn't know about shape note music until we did this exhibit, and now I've learned. Our early pioneers enjoyed the joy of music. Dance, I loved this one. In the early 1800s, members of the Seminole tribe performed the dance of the rising sun each spring atop Iron Mountain. Isn't that just amazing? And then theater in 1952. Again, the citizens of Lake Wales and local government contribute over $150,000 to build an outdoor amphitheater in a former sinkhole. So what was that? 1913 film, A Lakeland Romance, was filmed on Lake Mirror. So I'm so proud of you all that you're celebrating the history of arts and culture in Lake Wales, because you all are so much a part of the history of art and culture in the county. So come over and take a walk through the exhibit, and we'll just enjoy a little dance and theater and music and song and many other aspects. But today, we're here for a discussion of leadership in the arts in Lake Wales and how this art scene has prepared the community over the last several decades. And I'm going to introduce our panel. With me to talk about these subjects are Marilyn Newell, who's going to be joining us, Jayne Crews-Linton, and Robin Gibson. And while none of the people on our panel today are actually natives of Lake Wales, all have been making substantial contributions to its civic life for more than 50 years, and in no area more so than in the arts, as I believe you will see from our discussions. So with that, let's begin getting our panel on stage. So what we'll do, Robin, why don't we start with you since you're way down yonder, and talk to us about when you came to Lake Wales and what brought you here. Why did you find Lake Wales to be your home, and how is it that you became involved in arts in Lake Wales? And then when you tell your story, we'll let Jayne, and then we'll continue to Marilyn.
Let's see. Can you hear me? Or is this on? I think it's on. It's got a green light. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I hear it. Came to Lake Wales May 15, 1966. My parents were both born in Palatka, so I knew what small town life was like. Grew up in Miami, went back there to practice law in a great law firm for about 4 years, but our family, my wife Jayne over here, our family started coming along, and I just thought it would be better to raise them in a small town. There are a lot of intangible controls in a small town. People know who your kids are, so it's very difficult for them to misbehave. We've had some calls, from concerned parents, and one of our sons says, well, Mom knows everything. Well, thanks to the small town. And we have 4 squared away kids today. So practicing in Miami, deciding about a small town, question which small town. And Walter Woolfolk was a senior guy here, and his best friend was Emil's dad. Walter Woolfolk, who was the big fullback on Lake Wales High School's first football team, and state attorney and everything else. He tried a case against a couple of lawyers who were in this Miami firm that I was working in. And they became friends, as good lawyers do. And years later, Walter called the guy I was working with, who was one of those lawyers he tried a case against, and says, like Walter would, Carl, do you have anybody up there who would like to live in a small town? And I had talked to Carl, and he said, I just might. And so about 6 months later, I told Carl, I said, why don't you call him back? And he did. And we got an invitation to come up here. Came up here. I had looked in a number of other towns, but for one thing, it was a great law firm in a small town, really first-rate law firm. So I wasn't going to lose anything on that score coming from a great law firm in Miami, and decided to come. We moved into a small rental house on that date, May 15, 1966. Years later, Walter was retiring. Walter was a guy who had his desk piled with papers, but he could pull out the paper that he needed. And so he's putting away his papers, and he came to me and he said, Robin, here's the note I made when Carl called me back. It's in the top drawer of my desk. The top is Carl Leib. That's the Carl he was talking to, with a lot of flourish and everything. And then it says, Robin Gibson, age 28. and a lot of flourish. So this is a cherished remembrance and the reason that we came to Lake Wales.
Beautiful.
Well, I just have to latch on to his story because my first husband, Mike Crews, was in law school at the same time as Robin. And of course, I knew Jayne, too, and we were all associated at the time. Robin was a couple of years ahead of Mike, I think, in law school. Anyway, the reason we moved to Lake Wales was to follow on his coattails. And that's the truth. That's the reason we moved to Lake Wales. And of course, the fact that Mike was from Wauchula, born and raised, had nothing to do with it. But at least we got to stay in Lake Wales. And I always made fun of Lake Wales because it was such a small town. I'd never lived in a smaller town than Sarasota. But when I was moving here, I had just finished my master's degree at University of Florida in music. And I had been working really hard on a lot of things, and I just moaned and said, oh, what am I going to do in Lake Wales? Gosh, there were no opportunities, you know. I mean, that's what I assumed anyway. And it turned out that along came Milford Meyer, or I think the same year that we moved here, Milford Meyer moved to this community also. And of course, Mike and I were just right out of the university choir at Florida and just ready to sing anywhere and do anything. And I guess one of the first organized things that I remember about, I don't know if it was an arts council yet, but we used to meet in our family room at 900 Campbell Avenue and sing madrigals seated around a table about the size of these here, and just sing, just because we love to sing. And we could all read music and all that, and had some great times. Had a little wine sometimes and that kind of stuff. But that's how we got to know Milford, and that's how we got to talking about first it was the community concert series, and this lady will tell you all about that. And she's one of my first memories of Lake Wales, and she's still one of my dearest friends. We've gone through a lot together. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have as long and interesting a story as Robin, but Robin we ended up living right down the street from Robin and Jayne, and Jayne would call me up and say, let's take the kids down to the lake. So we'd make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and throw them in the basket, and we'd head down there with all the kids and let them run crazy, get some energy out. So that's a very good memory that I have of moving to Lake Wales.
Well, welcome to Lake Wales. Marilyn, how did you find your way to Lake Wales?
Well, that's a story, but before I say that, I want you to see that we're close friends, and we're old friends. We might be referred to as the gang of three. It used to be the gang of four, but in any event. I grew up in Zephyr Hills, metropolitan area, of course. But went to school at Duke and met my husband there, and he was from North Carolina, and he went to medical school at Duke, and I just presumed we would stay up there. He had helpers for this practice and that practice, but he said, I don't want my feet to hit the cold floor at 3 a.m. And I think maybe part of his attraction to me was the fact that I lived in Florida. And so we had heard about Leon Ackerman's developments on the Maryland and Virginia area, and he was opening Indian Lake Estates. So we promptly, on a visit to my parents, came over, and were told that if he would open an office there, certain perquisites would come our way. Well, we moved in the Christmas of 58, 59, that between Christmas and New Year's, and to our house there. But you all know there was a recession, and it didn't bloom right away. And Dr. Richard Mott, he offered Bruce, he was expanding his office space, and would he like to come into town to practice? And that was a very agreeable thing that happened. And I had heard there were community concerts, of course. Audubon gave films. These were in the old high school auditorium. Audubon had a film series there. There was a music club, a women's club at UW, and of course, I'm a gabber, and I joined these things, and suddenly all these opportunities opened up. So, and I remember my dad saying when we said we were going to come over here, he said, you'll love Lake Wales. It's a pretty little town, and they have very nice people. And so that has proved true, very true. And so, as I say, it's been a happy association. And actually, I have been on tours overseas and so forth. When one would hesitate to say you're from Lake Wales, Florida, but almost inevitably someone in that tour has been to Bach Tower. And so, and just one little sideline. Last year, my nephew and I were touring France. His wife has a new granddaughter she didn't want to leave. And we needed a driver to go up to the one of the hill towns. And they hired a driver for us from the hotel. And he came and introduced himself and was driving along. And my nephew said, how did you have such good English? Oh, he said, I worked in the States. He said, I worked at Cypress Gardens. Oh. And I said, really? No. And we were just off like then. And he said he brings his children back to the States every 2 or 3 years because he thought it was a wonderful experience. And I think actually he had been originally employed by Disney, and he went out to California, but he got a job at Cypress Gardens. So as I say, one never knows. Lake Wales does have a certain international credit.
And as we're hearing your stories and your arrival in Lake Wales, I'm sure everybody agrees with me. What a delightful, delightful contribution you've made. I'm glad you found your way to Lake Wales from various places. Jayne, you and your late husband, Mike, were very instrumental in forming the chorale and the Lake Wales Arts Council. Now, that's quite an undertaking in a little town that probably hasn't had much organization of arts and culture. So what was that like? How did you get started, and what were some of the experiences that you can share?
Well, first of all, we met at in the university choir at Gainesville. And, it progressed. And anyway, so we were both very interested in choral music and also church choirs and that kind of thing. And when we moved here, Mike had always gone to the Methodist church, so I, as a dutiful wife, I said, okay, but it turns out the Methodist choir was the best one in town in those days. That was a long time ago. But anyway, so we had this mutual interest, and, we always had to get 2 babysitters a week for choir rehearsal at the church and chorale rehearsal once we got that going. But Mike was a very good musician and could read music like a champ. He was in the band and played the trumpet and things like that. So he first we just had the group to our house to sing madrigals. Just finding people that were interested in singing with other people. A lot of musicians only want to sing alone, you know, so this turned out to be a really cohesive group, and we met once a week and enjoyed it. We did not have a director, but then they started talking about doing Messiah in Lake Wales. Well, we kind of looked around at each other, and we really didn't have anyone who could direct that piece, but we had this tiny little lady at the Methodist Church named Ruth Sims. I know a lot of you know her, and we'd kind of help her up on the organ seat, and she could play anything, and so we did have an accompanist, and Mike decided that he would take a stab at directing Messiah. Well, he did do it, and we had instruments and everything. It was performed at the Methodist Church, and I do have a wonderful picture of him directing, and some people that you would not believe that used to sing. Probably you all know. But anyway, it was a huge success, really. And it brought some other people out of the woodwork. And that's when we found Milford Meyer had a lot more experience directing than Mike did. And Mike had, you know, the experience of being a lawyer. He was with Robbins Law Firm, and he could form corporations and stuff like that. Also raise money. He was pretty good at it. And he kind of turned the next directorship over to Milford Meyer, who was actually the director of the chorale for quite a few years. Although we had one person in interim was a band director at Lake Wales High School named Ben Godfrey, who did direct here for a while, but then he moved on. So Milford came back, and we had Milford kind of chained to the tower out there, and he couldn't get away. We still call on him for lots of stuff, but and he's one of my dearest friends. But that was how we got the chorale started, and it just kind of was a separate entity at that time. And then at some point you decided that the community concert series might go independent, right?
Mike called me at the time, and he said, we're duplicating our efforts. And he said, we can do our own booking. What had happened with community concerts, their purpose was they went to small towns, and you sold memberships. And then they would provide very good artists who toured. And we had the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo in Lake Wales at one point, and opera and so forth. As the years went by, they kind of diminished in quality. It would be a soloist here and a soloist there. And there was a little bit of edgy, and so Mike said, we can do this ourselves. We don't need to, because it came with a fee, some big fee. And so Milford agreed to be the booking agent with the help of a small committee. And we found out, I remember calling Bob McDonald over at Florida Southern at the time and saying, how do we get in touch with these people? And he said, you don't need to worry. When they know you're looking, they'll get in touch with you. And did they ever? I mean, we heard from all sorts of people, and we'd make a selection. And because we didn't have the church at the time, we had it at the current high school auditorium, and had a pretty good season, I would say. Yeah. And so it did work out. With a little enterprise, small towns can do anything.
Well, there was a little bit of competition between Lake Wales and Winter Haven because they were also a community concert town, and it turns out when we went on our own, so to speak, we just did so much better than they did. Plus, Milford knew people who knew people, and you can talk to Andrew. You got to know people, right, to get this stuff done. And also, you've got to tap into, this group's going to be in Florida at this time, and another group's going to be in Florida at this time, and they can tack you onto their tour, and you get a better price and things like that. So that's what Mike was all about. He was going the fast way, and so we kind of took it from there. But then when we moved to Lake Wales in 1969, we had a 9-month-old daughter, and I just kept having babies. And so the next few years, we had 4 children, just like Jayne and Robin. And I was kind of out of the business at that point, and Mike he just took it by the horns and went with it. So he could get a job done, I must say.
Well, it's really so nice to hear about the people who make those commitments early on and getting things started. That's really a challenge. And I can only imagine conversations at the dinner table when Mike might say, did we really say we were going to do this? And did we really want to take this on? So congratulations, you all did. You accomplished great things, and it's much appreciated and it's recognizable today. So Marilyn, you also were very, very involved in the formation of the Arts Council. So tell us a little bit about that, a memory you might have, and then particularly share with us the fabulous 5 M's.
Oh, you heard about that. Coincidence. Mary Combs, that's M number 1. As you know, what happened at the old high school auditorium. And what was the Lake Wales Movie Theater, where the Circle of Friends is now, was going up for sale. Movies is kind of wagon train and whatnot had interfered with people going to the movies. And it was going to be sold for $75,000. And they had renovated it, put in all new seats, and fixed up the little stage and so forth. It was in good shape. And Mary thought, now if the city would buy that and lease it to organizations to use for civic things, that would be a good thing, and we could have concerts there. And I remember going down with Mike and Milford and John Caldwell, who had been with the theater group at Abingdon and Yale Major and Theater, and he said the acoustics are good. Then they passed on everything, and there was a little foyer where we could have had receptions and things. It was perfect. But the city was not interested in spending that kind of money. And then the other thing was parking would be an issue because there really wasn't much available parking. But the idea, the ones that Mary had called together, and Mike and so forth, decided it was too good an idea to drop it, to get a group together to have performances. And so I think they went over to Daytona Beach. I didn't go on that. But a group went over and met with people who had arts councils. And Mike drew up the charter. And it was Mary, Mike, Marie, Milford, and Marilyn. That's the 5 M's that are on the charter, I think, on the sign. That we had to sign for it. And so that's where that came from. And as I say, it got rolling. And we got into doing our own booking, and they took over the art show from AEUW. AEUW had it the first 5 years, and the next thing you know, here we are, and still going. Nice new director. I mean, things can turn out well sometimes. It's a little bit of a push.
Do you remember the year that this started?
I think the charter.
The charter.
I could actually project because I taught 7th grade.
Oh yeah.
I think the charter is 72. Andrew, do you know? And 72.
Thank you.
And we got rolling the next year. But the Arts Council started out being very helpful in the community because they gave prizes for the very first art show for children to make a poster, elementary school children. And we had a judge, and it was a very formal thing. And these kids did posters about arts. And there were 5 winners. And the Arts Council gave $25. So each kid got $5. Then we found out later on they really preferred a certificate to McDonald's. So that the next few years, that's what happened. But that was how it got.
Thank you very much. Now, Robin, the really hard part, got to pay the bills. So in late 1990s and 2000, you spearheaded a capital campaign to raise funds for, I guess, the expansion and refurbishment of the Arts Center. We'd love for you to share with us that experience, the people who stood by you and helped you, and just some of your memories of that capital campaign project.
I really don't need the microphone. I was at a meeting one time, and I said, "Can you hear me?" And I said, and the microphone wasn't working. So I said, "Any lawyer worth his salt can be heard in the back of the room." And Joe Young, as a wise guy, was in the back of the room, and he says, "I can't hear you." So I assume I'm being heard. Bill's, what I didn't know was Bill's real desire was to head up an arts council. And that opportunity presented itself at the Arts Council, now with the building, thanks to Fran, to do the activities. And Bill came over, and the facilities really needed help. I happened to have been on the University of Florida Foundation Board, and I guess they knew that. And I learned a lot from being up there. And they said he and Mary Craig came to me and would not take no for an answer. And so I said, "All right, I'll do it." And there were many evenings at our dining room table with Bill Dickinson, Mary Craig, Gene Gibson, and myself. And applying the principles that I had learned at the University of Florida, we laid out a fundraising campaign, which succeeded dramatically. And there's one I'll save for the end, one thing that really impressed me about this community. We mapped out, you all have done this kind of thing. You've got to have lists, and you map out, and it's how to approach, and there's all sorts of things. We employed all those techniques and methods in reaching people. We received a lead gift from Mary Kane at Mountain Lake. And we wanted to name the facility. There was Updike Hall, and if we could afford an attachment to the facility, we wanted to name it for Mike Crews. And then there were major contributions from Jayne and Mike's brothers, Bill and Denny. And then all these folks from the community. Here's the thing that really impressed me. Part of fundraising is you take not just the contributions, but pledges. We took pledges. There is in fundraising a factor. Not all the pledges are going to be honored. And so you have to build in this factor so that you don't run short with the money that you're able to raise. In Lake Wales, every penny of every pledge was paid in full. Not one member of this community fell back on a pledge. I know of no other fundraising effort that can say that. It was very impressive to me. We had to get together in Updike Hall to celebrate the conclusion of the campaign. And what we did was, we started out with the numbers. The people who had been very involved in the campaign each had a placard. Some of you may remember this. And we had it down to the penny. Started out with the last penny, maybe a 4. Then there was a 5. Then there was a decimal point. And then there was the dollar, the 10. And people kept coming and coming and coming. And we got into the hundreds. And then came John Alexander with the 1 million. And we had raised, it was right at $1.4 million. And as a result of that, we're able to renovate the facility and build that 2-story structure, put in that wonderful art gallery in the first floor and the classrooms above. Name it for Mike Crews. And Mary Kane made arrangements for a nationally known exhibit. It was our first exhibit. And it had to be in air conditioning 24 hours a day, and it had to have a security guard 24 hours a day that we had to pay for. And that's how we raised the money. That was the success that we had, and that was the way we kicked it off.
That is such a beautiful story. When you think about development and raising money, there are 3 words that come to mind here: is purpose, intention, and love. What a great contribution that you all have participated in. Great, that is a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Marilyn, tell us a little bit about the beginnings of the Citizens Bank and Trust Arts Festival, and particularly the Marilyn Newell Youth Music Festival.
Well, let's start with the art show first. Actually, the idea was begun, in a sense, by a member of this church, Alma Cooper, Kay Ingley's mother. She came to an AAUW board meeting, and she said, "We've got a problem." What kind of problem? She said she was reading, or her 5th grade class at Dale Fair, which is a good school, was reading a story, and the word symphony came up. And half of those youngsters did not know what that word meant. Well, of course, eyebrows shot up, got to do something about that. So the upshot was, Mary Combs was president at that time, that we were going to do an arts festival week to introduce various arts to this community. And unfortunately, I was the cultural interest chairman, and it was given to me. Do it. Well, the budget was $125 for the whole week. So Perry Grubbs, choir director out at Warner Southern then, he brought his choral group, and they gave a wonderful program. The band master at the time said he would incorporate, the band was going to do an evening program, he would make that part of the festival. Weber College had its History of Fashion show, they would make it part of the festival. Mary called in a chit from a choir director or a choral director up at Rollins College, who brought a string quartet down on the premise that they would get dinner and be able to see Bach Tower. Not hard to fulfill. Helen Offord took over the thing of the dinner, and it turned out very well. And the only thing that we were missing a little something. And I remember that my husband and I had been to an outdoor show in Blowing Rock that summer beforehand. Sidewalk art, not a sidewalk, but an outdoor art show, and it was so pleasant. So sidewalk art show. And Publix gave us permission to use the sidewalk. And it was on a Friday. It wasn't Saturday, but Friday's a good shopping day. People come. And so we had 15 artists. We had to beg some of them to come. And, of course, I didn't know a thing in the world about running an art show. But Jayne and Reg Strange, late, very famous artist around here, they gave me their brochures and lots of advice. And later on in the art show, Jayne provided various artists to demonstrate their crafts and things, show off. Anyhow, we got it off, and it turned out, in the end, that was the popular thing. And during that year, Robin was engineering that reconstruction of downtown, working on the parking and the curbs and the plant, making it look better. And so it was ready by the next year. So we said, we'll go ahead. And we had 32 artists, and we had one from out. These figures are in my memory. I'll never lose them. We had one from Winter Haven. We were expanding. And at that time, he made a good point about community involvement here. People would come up and hand me an envelope with some money in it. This is for the art show. Draper's Furniture said, we'll open our store and people can come in and rest there and use the facilities. Mr. Hugh B. Alexander said the bank would open its back so people could use the facilities there. Everybody was very helpful downtown. Lake Wales is amazing in that respect. And the third year we had 45. And Jane Halliburton was the registrar at that time, because we needed a registrar at that point. And we had the Tampa Bay Pipes and Drums. I had a college friend who was active in that in Tampa, Mac McLean, a lawyer. And they brought the whole pipes and drums, and they marched down Stewart Avenue with pipes skirling and, kilts running. And then they gave a master class to the Highlander band down originally. And then Gene Gibson provided help in getting with girls. Well, they were girls then, Gene. The young matrons here to serve the artist coffee and see if they needed anything, coffee and donuts and fruit juice and so forth. And they all had their little orange citrus skirts on. And the artist, of course, had to park away. They had to carry things. They didn't have tents in those days. They just had easels. And orange crates, yeah, just whatever they could put together. And so it was a matter of carrying all this stuff. And so husbands were enlisted. And so I don't think those artists realized all these distinguished attorneys and doctors and Caroliners, Milford Health, were lugging their stuff in and helping them set up. That's Lake Wales. You see, that's the way this place runs, and it was wonderful. But I will, if you've got time for a little story, I wanted to tell about what unexpected things happen. The very first show, Fran Updike offered, we had to have a professional judge, and we got the director of the Maitland Arts Center. And he agreed to come, and on the premise that we would have French toast 2 or 3 mornings, my husband agreed to pay for his fee. And he brought 2 people with him. Well, how long does it take to judge 15 artists? They were through. And Fran had volunteered to have them have lunch at her house, and the tables were all set, and she had, everything arranged. And she came to me, woebegone, and she said, uh-oh, she said, we've got a problem. She said, they want to go to the Chalet Suzanne. And I thought, well, there's not money for them to go to the Chalet Suzanne. Arch Updike, another husband got in, came to the risk. He said, I'll take care of it. He said, we want to have a good reputation. And they went out to the chalet. Arch paid the bill. They had 2 rounds of drinks, I understood, before. I mean, they could see this was just a small, well, never mind, but you never. But subsequent judges were very good, and they didn't even were happy with a hot dog. Peter Kinsey, had a music store downtown. Then he'd roll his organ out and play. And we had a puppeteer come who was with Ringling. And Jayne took a notice around to every classroom saying that they were going to have this. And we had all these wrapped children sitting on the ground while he did his little puppet show and so forth right downtown. As I say, it's always been a community enterprise, and that's what makes me so glad we came here to live.
Well, thank you for sharing the story. And I have a feeling there are probably more stories. We're going to have to figure out a way
yes.
to hear the rest of those stories sometime.
I was going to say Jayne, Terry, and I, we collected some of those things, didn't we, Jayne? And I, alas, have never gotten them together and published them. But apropos the youth music, I'll get that. We've had a student art, and that was another thing. Ann Norton had a student art show, and she incorporated that into our art show, and that became a fixture of it too. And of course, it was at the library for a long time, which were beautiful cases and everything to show off ceramics. But we had this lovely student art show, and it dawned on me one day we weren't doing anything for student musicians. And so at the board meeting, I presented this notion that we were overlooking student musicians. And, it's just something that hadn't occurred that needed to be done. And I said very firmly, but I don't want to be chairman of the committee. That'll get you very far. and Bill Dickinson said, I've done this before and I know how to, as I say, I didn't have a clue on art shows, and I certainly didn't know how to run a music competition, but he had done it before and he knew how to handle the judges' sheets and everything. So we got that going very well, and it's been a joy ever since. It's been to hear a child of 11 years old come up on the stage in front of these ominous-looking judges and do a little curtsy, sit down at the piano, play Mendelssohn's Spinning Song flawlessly, get up and curtsy and leave. The poise and what they can do, it's amazing. And I've been asked to do that at 11. I would have been, they had to carry me out in a straitjacket, I think. But they're remarkable young people. And if you get a chance, I'm going to do advertising now. If you get a chance, the competition is next Saturday, a week from today. You can drop in a few minutes and leave. There's no reason. You can listen for a little bit. But the recital is Sunday afternoon at 3. The winners don't know who's winning until that afternoon. So they have to bring their instruments and their music. And then they're announced, and then they get up and play something. And it turns out to be a pretty good free concert. So, that's it.
Well, that's a lot from you, and it's wonderful. Thank you for those wonderful contributions. And yes, the young people, congratulations that you remembered and somebody thought about adding the young people to this. Yeah. Jayne, we'd be interested in hearing from you as a member of chorale and as an exhibiting artist. How do you feel the community, or how much support do you feel you get from the community in terms of supporting artists?
Well, I certainly have enjoyed a nice mini career as an artist in this community and others, where I did quite a bit of traveling at one point to different communities for shows. But probably the most successful show I've ever had was the last one that I had at the Lake Wales Arts Center. And it was, the attendance was wonderful. And I had a professional person help me hang the show, being Kathy Gibson from Tampa. I mean, from Lake Wales via Tampa. Anyway, and it turned out to be really good. But I think on a whole, Lake Wales is a very supportive community. Last night I attended a meeting at the Lake Wales Women's Club, who has their own building too, and I think Robin's been involved in this. I can't remember the name of the firm. Do you? Dover Cole. I think they're a downtown development firm, which they just presented some of the most mind-blowing things to us about what can be done with some of the old buildings downtown, and not tearing them down, and with a little paint and a little scrub, it just was amazing. I went home all excited about this. Most of you know my son Scott Crews, who's with Parlier and Crews Architects, and he and Mark were there last night, and they've been very instrumental in bringing about some of this week. They had a week where they had a meeting on Monday, and then they had a meeting last night with the results of what they learned and what they are kind of recommending us to do, and how to pay for it. So Lake Wales has always surprised me. When I moved here, I told you I thought maybe I was going to the end of the world, and you couldn't even see it from here. So the people in this area are cultured and well-read, and have always stepped up to the plate to get things done. I'm so grateful that I moved here at that point, raised 4 children in this community, and loved it, every minute of it.
So I think what everybody's saying, it's really great to call Lake Wales home. Now, we're going to wrap up with one final question for the panel. And as we've done in the past, if we have time, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask a question. But what I'd like each of you to do is share with us what you see. We'll say 10 years out. How do you see the future of the arts and cultural scene in Lake Wales? What do you see happening? What are the needs, or whatever you see the future to be?
Well, I think the future is good. And I would say that there are at least 3 what you'd call keys. One is Bok Tower. Bok Tower is a large part of the reason that this community is distinctive in terms of its arts and culture. The second is the Arts Center, which is also distinctive for a place of this size. And the third is the project that Jayne was talking about, with Dover Coal on board. They're internationally known as the planners, and the reason they're here is because Victor Dover is a cyclist, and he has known about Lake Wales for 20 years. This, for cyclists with the hills and the back roads and everything, is a favored area. And he put in to be the planner for this and brought his firm here just to show you how extensive they are. I happen to have been in born in Port of Spain, Trinidad. They've done the downtown for Port of Spain, Trinidad. And this project that they are laying out for us, along with the capacity that this community has for bringing that project to reality, is going to be one of the big cultural anchors, because there's so much historic preservation associated with it. And I do happen to be, one of the nuttiest things I ever did was run for city commission and be elected. And so I do happen to be a city commissioner. They asked me to be the deputy mayor. The deputy mayor chairs the Community Redevelopment Agency, and that's where I want to be. And with this firm and the quality of their program and the capacity of this community, I'll tell you right now, I'm all in. And this thing is going to happen. 40 some odd years ago, we did one with downtown that was very successful. It's tired. And this thing is far more comprehensive than what we did back then, basically on our own. So I would say that the future is very bright. And one thing I want to say here, this is not a future designed to become another Orlando. This is a future to enhance a small town culture, small town charm, small town quality of life. And I'm going to propose an amendment to the charter to that effect, to where we don't allow ourselves to become trampled and overrun and lose our characteristic.
The program last night just blew me away, and I was like, sitting on the front row, and he was just pumping us up. But the slides that he showed us, which had been, they were taken with Lake Wales being the core picture, and then they enhanced it, which is all that miraculous stuff that I don't know how to do, but they just blew our minds. And they kept showing us pictures of Winter Park, which is in the Orlando area, but we're not as big as Winter Park, but it was the cute little quaint things about Winter Park that we all love. And it just got us so excited. I know that there was also a program out at Mountain Lake about this. Ruth, did you attend that program? What did you have any feelings about it? Well, I had to leave kind of early, but apparently last night they had a woman who addressed the grants and so forth that are available to us, and she spoke about how to raise the money and what money we can get, and that was really good. And I was as a former resident out at Mountain Lake, I know that there are a lot of people out there that would be interested in this kind of thing. So Pete Weber told me that there were about 40 people at that meeting at Mountain Lake. So we hope we can get it off. It's just phenomenal. If you get a chance to see what they have done, go see it.
Yep, the future's looking really bright. Marilyn, you agree?
Yes, I do, and I certainly hope it comes to fruition. But one other thing that why I have faith in the future here is because we are managed to get our young people involved in these things. If you go to the center right now, you'll see all these bright-eyed, lean, slim, happy, active teenagers running things, and they do a good job, and they're interested. And as I say, in the schools, the academy and so forth, are encouraging, and so I think a lot of the happiness in the future in Lake Wales is going to reside with our upbeat, intelligent, bright young people.
Thank you, Marilyn. Now it's your turn. Here I come. Over the river and through the woods. We'll take time for at least one, maybe two questions. So where's our first question?
Because we've been talking about the Lake Wales Chorale, we've got to invite you all to our concert
That's what I forgot.
on Sunday evening at Holy Spirit Catholic Church. Admission's only $15. What a great evening. We're doing the Duraflame Requiem. It's going to be drop dead gorgeous. Thank you all.
At 6 p.m. Sunday afternoon at the Holy Spirit Catholic Church, not to be confused with the Art Center.
I'm sold out twice.
Does anybody else have a question, a comment, or just an appreciation you'd like to make to the panel?
Marilyn told me a wonderful story about the ongoing feud that she and Jetta frequently had about whether God preferred Carolina or God preferred Duke. Would you tell that story, Marilyn?
When I think of Jetta, I think of the deadpan funny things she would say. She'd say hilarious things, absolutely straight-faced, and then wait for you to get it. Well, Jetta got her master's degree at the University of North Carolina, and I went to that other school. And when she did the yearbooks for AUW, they were always in that pale blue. You know the saying, if God isn't a Tar Heel, why is the sky Carolina blue? And I complained to her one time. I said, didn't they have to always be that baby blue? And she said, what do you expect, Marilyn? It's a better school. Just that was so much like her when I think of her. I always think of that attitude.
Has this been a fun day or has this been a fun day? There's not one person that will leave this place today without such a sense of joy that we all had ended up here, and that we have people like Myrtice, and we have people like Tina, and we have people like Andrew, and people like every person sitting here who has loved Lake Wales, continue to love Lake Wales, looking forward to the excitement of the next few years in Lake Wales and how we can all pull together and make it just the vision that you're seeing already. And we're just blessed. God bless all of you. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.